Okay. There are many levels of existence, and there are many dimensions of existence, and they're numberless and countless. There are many realms of existence, dimensions of existence, and modes of existence. But within all these existences, there are numberless amount of sentient beings. There's no count. When people refer to a realm, they always talk about the human realm, but that's very limited. That's a speck in the vastness of the galaxy. And within that speck, you have various dimensions. You have various levels of existence. All of this, in Buddhist terminology, you would call samsara. So samsara is not about 7 billion people on the planet. It's much more than that. So that is why when we refer to benefiting sentient beings, we're talking about innumerable, numberless sentient beings, because they're so vast in number, you don't actually have a count on them. All right? It is said only a Buddha has the omniscience to perceive how many exact sentient beings there are. Okay? But definitely, the amount of sentient beings is much more than the grains of sand on every single beach on this planet. Now, within this planet, we have very different dimensions. For example, we are right now in Kichara Forest Retreat. We are existing in one dimension, but simultaneously there are spirits, land gods, nature devas that exist. They're another dimension, but we exist simultaneously. Sometimes we cross paths and we can see each other. Sometimes we don't. But just because we don't see them doesn't mean they're not existing right here. So they can be existing in the same dimension, and it can cross sometimes. So therefore, the amount of beings that exist in different types of dimensions and different modes of existence are quite diverse, innumerable, and without count. Now, in the Buddhist term, when we talk about a pure land such as Sukhavati, the Western paradise of Amitabha Buddha, or we talk about Tushita, Ganden, Iga, Chunzin, the paradise of Maitreya, or we talk about Kichara, the paradise of Hiruka, Yamataka, Vajrayogini, or the paradise of Manjushri, Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, such as Potala, or Akshobhya Buddha, and so on and so on and so on. Those are places that you travel with the mind, or in some terminology, with the consciousness or soul. So those places you ascend mostly with your consciousness. There are exceptional cases where people ascend to Kichara paradise with their very bodies and it transform. And the reason for that is the bodies are made up of 4 elements. So the rougher, grosser elements become lighter, and they become more lighter elements, such as light. But on this planet, we have also many types of existences and places that Nagas exist in, the places where Yakshas and Rakshas exist in, the places where spirits exist in, and it's simultaneous with us. Spirits can have a little community, and they can be living right next to you, you wouldn't see it, but it's still existing in the same space as you, but on a different dimension. I repeat, they exist in the same space as you, but on different dimension. Hence, many types of beings can exist and live in one spot, and you don't crisscross. Now, there's a pure land that is physical that you can actually go to on this planet, and it is called Shambhala. Shambhala is a pure land that is said to exist within the Himalayan mountains. You have to understand the Himalayan mountain range is massive. Okay, it's just huge and it's massive, and most of it is unexplored because people simply just can't get there. All right? So within the Himalayan mountain range, which is Karakoram, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tibet, Nepal, China, part of it, India, this whole area surrounded by these countries, and within these countries is the Himalayan region. So the Himalayan region expands to most of Tibet, if not all of Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, North India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, parts of it, also China, and maybe, did I say Nepal? Nepal. So this is the Himalayan kingdom. It's massive. Now, there are people living there. There are animals living there. There are yetis living there. There are birds living there. There are insects. There are microscopic animals or beings living there. They have a different way of existence because of the cold. They have a different way of functioning and eating and defecating and sleeping and procreating because of the cold. But they still exist. Now, within that Himalayan kingdom, within that Himalayan range or region of land is where Shambhala is said to have located. Now, Shambhala is a place that's surrounded by mountains, but they themselves live in a valley. Because they live in a valley, they get very fresh water from the mountains that is snow-capped. So the snows melt and they get fresh water. And the people who live there, they grow their own foods. It is said that they are vegetarian and they eat grains, they eat vegetables. They don't eat rough, fleshy, bloody foods. They eat very light, natural foods that are growing. So it's very healthy for their body. There's no toxins and pollution there because they don't have modern amenities such as electricity, cars, petrol usage. They don't have oil usage. They don't have anything that leaves a footprint in the environment and damages the environment. And also, everything they have, everything they do there is generated within themselves. But it is said because the valley is extremely well located, and I'm talking about in a geographical sense, where the sun comes at the right time, the seasons come at the right time, and also the water is there. There's heat, there's moisture, there's also there's dryness, there's lakes and all that. So a lot of things there grow naturally, spontaneously, because of the geographical configuration. Isn't there some parts of our planet that things just grow very easily? And there's some things on our planet that nothing grows, or it's very difficult to grow. So that's a geographical configuration of that location. And the people who live there, it's basically a monarchy, and it's ruled by saintly kings, one after another. Now, this becomes a little mythological, but the kings are said to be all emanations of Lord Manjushri. So, these kings, the first king actually left the kingdom and he went to Lord Buddha. He heard about Lord Buddha's fame and he went to request and receive teachings from Lord Buddha. And among the many teachings that Lord Buddha had conferred on him was the famous Tantra of Kalachakra. The famous inner, outer, and secret Kalachakra Tantras that was conferred to him. And he took the Tantras of Kalachakra and he also took the teachings of Buddha and went back to Shambhala kingdom and he practiced it. And he was said to gain very high realizations. And after that, he taught his kingdom. So he taught his kingdom, he taught his ministers, he taught the people that were interested, and therefore a lot of qualified masters were produced during his time, which after this king passed away, then the next generation taught it, Mind you, they lived for hundreds of years. How many hundreds of years? The scriptures differ. Some say, 500-600 years, some say 100-200 years. It differs. So their place, things grow very easily. It's always green. Things don't freeze over. They have plenty of water. They have plenty of sunshine. They're protected by a ring of mountains. And it is said that when you travel, some travelers have come across the entrance. The entrance is marked. There are markings to find the entrance. But it is said that you have to have a very strong karmic affinity to be able to find this place. So you can literally get your trekking gear. You can literally get your trekking stuff. And you can trek to the mountains and find them because people in the past have done that and have found the entrance. Some go in and stay. Some go in and come back and tell us about it. And so people there live for very long lives. They don't have any disease as we know it. They don't have greed because their society is not based on money. It's not based on acquisitions. It's not based on material things. Things grow. So people help each other to build houses. They live together. They produce their own clothes. So there's no need for greed and there's no need for acquisitions and materialism because everything they have, they share. It's just like some of the inverted commas primitive people we see today still living in South America, in the Philippine Islands, and some of the Caribbean islands. They don't have greed. They live as a community. Sorry to say, they kill the pigs in the forest. They share the pigs. They share the clothes. They share whatever grows. There's no sense of, I own this, I own that, I own this. You know what I mean? So that does exist in the outside world, outside of Shambhala. So in Shambhala, there's no sense of greed because people share their resources and there's no acquisition of wealth. They basically have families. They get married. They grow vegetables. They have arts, they have music, they have singing, they write books, and on top of that, they study the Dharma, and they practice the Kalachakra Tantra in particular. Now, how can someone go there? You can physically go there if you have the directions, or you can astrally travel there. In the Tibetan tradition, there have been many lamas who have astrally traveled to Shambhala and came back and gave a very strong, a very clear and accurate description. One of them was His Holiness the Panchen Lama. Because the Panchen Lama line of reincarnations are considered the emanations of one of the kings of Shambhala. So he has a very strong connection to Shambhala. And in Tibet, there is a very strong tradition of His Holiness the Panchen Lama giving Kalachakra teachings and initiations to people. And it was highly sought after because he was considered emanation of their king. So therefore, inadvertently, the Kalachakra teachings became associated with Shambhala. They were not associated initially. Kalachakra is a teaching, Shambhala is a place. But because the king went to receive teachings from a Lord Buddha, Shakyamuni, and he practiced it, then it became inadvertently associated. All right? So, now this Shambhala, there are a few Tibetan texts that talk about it. There are a few Tibetan texts that talk about how to get there. And there's a few Tibetan texts that talk about how to meditate and astrally get there. And there are very renowned, famous, well-known, learned lamas who tell you they traveled there psychically or they traveled there physically. So when someone of that caliber like Panchen Lama tells you, it's hard to doubt him because everything else he does is nearly perfect. So if someone like Jack Ma told you, if you do this, you'll get rich, I mean, we're going to do it. Because he has a reputation of making things successful, right? So, if Tsem Rinpoche told you this is how you're going to get rich, we're going to say, okay, let's research it first. Because I don't have a reputation of doing well in business. But if Jack Ma tells you, why not? So Panchen Lama is like the Jack Ma of Buddhism. If he tells you exists, you don't doubt because he's done so much already. So therefore, we can visit Shambhala or go there two ways, physically, because it is a physical place. People can find it. And it's a place that you can travel astrally if you're physically unable to go due to age or, you have disease, because not everybody can walk through the snows. So, Kalachakra is associated with Shambhala in that way, in a nutshell. We can also make prayers to take rebirth in Shambhala. What's the benefit of taking rebirth in Shambhala? You're a human. You're on this earth. You eat, you sleep, you defecate, you get old, you also die, but you live a very long life because it's a very peaceful place. It's a very quiet place. It's a spiritually charged place that's free of greed. So a lot of human aggression, a lot of human negative aggression and greed and anger and all that is hardly existent in Shambhala. Does it mean that everybody in Shambhala is a Buddha? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that it's a place that doesn't breed and encourage those kind of actions. Okay? So, there are communities throughout the planet Earth where people's greed and people's materialism is much less because the society doesn't support it. It's very simple. Okay? Now, once you go there, what do? You live just like we live here, but we have less problems, less sickness to deal with, almost none. We have less materialism, less fighting, less danger. And it's a very beautiful, natural place to live. No toxins, no pollution. All right? So, Tibetan lamas, Mongolian lamas, Nepalese lamas, Bhutanese lamas, Indian Mahasiddhas, Indian great masters, basically Himalayan region, Himalayan kingdom, renowned people have talked about this place over and over and over again. Everybody cannot be lying. One of the biggest promoters of this region in the Western world was Nicholas Roerich, who named this movement the Shambhala movement. And he wanted to visit a place. He wrote about it, and he told people in Russia, where he's from, and in the West, And it became a new age thing now where such a holy place exists in the world. Okay, so Nicholas Roerich in the Western world was very renowned for promoting the land of Shambhala. And he didn't see it as a mystical land, he saw it as a spiritually potent land where you can really go. So, is it good for us to take rebirth there? Of course it is. If we can take rebirth there, why not? Why not? So how do you take rebirth there? Well, you can pray to the kings there. You can pray to the kings, focus on the kings, may I take rebirth there. You can focus on Shambhala itself and think, may I take rebirth there. You can focus on Kalachakra Buddha and say, may I take rebirth there. You can focus on Shakyamuni when you think, may I take rebirth there. So taking rebirth there is just a wish. All right? Now, because the Himalayan lamas have talked about this for 2,500 years, the West has heard about it. The West. So, there's this person who started the Shangri-La Hotel chain of hotels back in the 30s. And James Hilton, Hilton Hotel. Right, Hilton Hotel. He started, what is it, Shangri-La Hotel something? Whatever. Hilton Hotel. He started a chain of hotels. And he was a very intelligent man, and he was a writer. And he heard about this. So he wrote a very famous book, which I have, I'll show you. It's called Lost Horizon. Now, James Hilton never went to Shambhala, but he heard about it from whomever, and he made up his own story based on the Eastern stories about that. And he wrote a beautiful little short book that 2 movies have been made from it. A movie back in a black and white one back in the 50s, I think, 40s, which I have, and one in the 70s, and they're called Lost Horizon. But their movie is based on Shambhala and similar to Shambhala, but the plot changes, of course. So a synopsis of the movie Lost Horizon, which is one of my favorite movies, is a group of people are trying to escape from whatever it was, China. And they're Westerners, they were missionaries, and they were diplomats, and there was some turmoil going on at that time. Because this was written in the 30s. And so they got into a plane, and the plane crash landed in the Himalayas. And everybody in the plane, minus the pilot, survived. And so they were all in the plane, and each of them, the characters, had their own neuroses, they have their own fears, they have their own issues, right? And so they're in the middle of the Himalayas, they don't know how they're going to survive. And then they're stuck there overnight. Then what they see is a bunch of lamas, monks, lamas, with torches coming, and they're rescued. And the lamas come to the airplane and rescue them and take them back. They have to trek through the snow for a few days. They take them back to Shangri-La, the entrance. And they will arrive at Shangri-La, there's a marking, as it says in the scriptures, and then they enter a huge, massive cave. The cave has 2 entrances. You enter and you exit, or you enter, you exit. So they enter this massive cave. And as they pass through the cave, the cold starts to diminish. And when they arrive at the other side of the cave, there's a huge opening, and they look out, it's the land of Shambhala. Green, with monasteries, with birds, with lush vegetation, beautiful, youthful people walking around, calm, quiet, no cars, no airplanes, no machinery. And everybody's so welcoming. So the main character is looking behind him. He turns around and he looks, and guess what? There's all this snow. Then he looks in front of him, and there's this lush valley. And he just can't believe where he is. So the lamas bring them down to their monastery, and they treat them as guests. And they talk to them, and they give them food, they help them to heal. So each of them, one of the ladies in the book, one of the ladies' characters was very unhappy with her life. She wanted to commit suicide. So the Lama saved her life and talked to her and released her pain, released her guilt, released her feeling of emptiness, and loneliness, because she ran around, she was a photojournalist, she ran around taking pictures of people getting killed and shot and hurt. So it affected her, and she couldn't live anymore. So by living in Shambhala, she healed herself, and she wanted to stay. Then there's another person who was a comedian, and he was a performer, And although he was doing okay, he wasn't happy in the outside world, he decided to stay. So the movie focused on each character and their own personal issues and problems and how they all heal. There was only one person there who was not happy and he wanted to get out of Shambhala. And so what happens was the main character, the main person in the book, was granted audience with the highest Lama of Shambhala. So it's very mystical. So they take him through all these dark chambers, and he goes and he meets the High Lama. The High Lama in the book turns out to be a Christian priest, a friar of some sort. But he doesn't promote Christianity or anything. But he happens to be a missionary that went there, and in the book, he formed Shambhala. Of course, that's not what it is, but that's the James Hilton version. But in any case, he's quite mystical, and everything's very Tibetan, very Buddhist, And so he's not talking about Christianity. He's talking about universal compassion. He's talking about no greed. He's talking about love, being polite, and working together, creating harmony. So what happens is this Lama, Lama, is dying, and he's over 200 years old or whatever it is. And he needs to pass the leadership to this person that they have predicted will come. So he's grooming this person to pass the leadership over to him. And this person is having conflicts whether he should stay or not, because he's a high-profile diplomat. And along the way, he falls in love with a lovely lady in Shangri-La, and she never wants to leave. She wants to live there. She was brought there when she was very young. And then his brother, who wanted to leave, fell in love with another lovely lady in Shangri-La who wanted to leave also. So there's this conflict going on. And how can they leave is every 2 to 3 years, porters come from the outside world to deliver some goods in the book. The real Shambhala doesn't need porters. So in the book, they have porters come. So when they come, you can follow the porters back to civilization. So what happens? The porters have showed up. So this diplomat's brother wanted to leave. He doesn't want to stay in Shambhala. He's not interested. He wants money, he wants fun, he wants the cities. And this girl from Shambhala, who they fell in love with each other, wants to leave also. So the Lama said to him basically, look, don't take her out. If you take her out, she's going to die because she's like 100 years old. But she's this beautiful woman, young, with lush black hair, just very vibrant and alive. And she's telling the diplomat, look at me. Do I have the skin of an old woman? Do I have the passion of an old woman? He's like, no, you don't look like an old woman at all. So anyways, the porters come. The brother convinces the diplomat to go with them. So the diplomat, the brother, and this Shangri-La girl leaves with them, and they go with the porters. So the porters are very fast, and they go ahead. And they're going behind, so they shout, hey, wait for us, wait for us, wait for us. And they create an avalanche. And the avalanche carried away the porters. So these three are stuck in a snowstorm. They're stuck in the middle of the Himalayas, but it was actually filmed in Pasadena. Pasadena, California. They're stuck in this huge snowstorm. The three of them, the girl from Shangri-La, or Shambhala, whatever you prefer, and then the diplomat and his brother. And the girl says, I just can't go anymore. I'm so tired. So they found a cave nearby, and they carried her. And when she arrived at the cave, she became an old woman. Her skin became wrinkled. Her hair became white. And the diplomat realized everything the Lama told him was true. That when you're in Shangri-La, your youth is preserved for a long time. The diplomat's brother, who didn't believe that, was in shock. Because he said, they're lying to you. This girl isn't 100 years old. She's young. Look at her. We're going to go out and have a good time in New York, in Paris, Tokyo. We're not going to stay here. So in front of his eyes, he couldn't accept it. He saw. So he ran out and he fell over the cliff. So the diplomat was stuck in the snow, and he walked down to civilization, and they put him in a hospital. So because he was a high diplomat, people had sent to go and get him back to the Western world. And when they came to his room in the hospital, after he had recovered from dehydration and a little bit of frostbite, he ran away. And the end of the movie is so beautiful because they're singing and all that. He ran away, and you see him arrive at the entrance of Shangri-La. Because he is prophesied to take over as the next world leader for Shambhala because the old Lama had passed away. But in between all this, when they're inside Shambhala, what's beautiful is that each one of the characters goes through their own transformations. They become light, unmaterialistic, happy. They let go of all their burdens. They let go of all their stress. They let go of all their memories. And they just become happy. They live there in simplicity. They live there in simplicity, in happiness, in pureness. And that's what Shambhala is all about. So the movie ends with the diplomat going back there and meeting up with his friends again, and also to Shambhala. And his girl's waiting for him. So that's very westernized. And then the movie ends. And I've watched this movie 20, 30 times because I wish I could go to Shambhala. Not for the girl, but not for the simplicity in life, but for the spirituality. So I watched this because this is the only movie available about Shambhala. So what's beautiful about it is it is in the mountains. It is difficult to find. And they depicted that very well. And then when you get there, it is a pure life with no modern amenities. And the water is clean, the environment is clean, everything grows, there's no greed. That's very true. And then it's ruled by High Lama. That's kind of true because the one that rules is actually the spiritual kings, right? And then they have monasteries there, lamaseries there. That's accurate. So the only thing that James Hilton had embellished to make it more westernized was the romance that happened there. And, somebody didn't believe in the place and that some people wanted to escape. But it became a very classic book, and it became a big hit, and 2 movies were made of it, and it's just very beautiful. So if you go to Shangri-La Hotel, you'll see the book being sold. Even till now, it's a classic. So the movie is called Lost Horizon, and I gave you a synopsis of it. And what I like to do is watch it with all of you one of these days, because it's although it's embellished Western ideals of romance and finding the perfect place to live, but it's based on the Eastern teaching of Shambhala or Shangri-La. Some people call it Shambhala, some people call it Shangri-La. It's the same thing. Okay, so it's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. It's one of the most touching, and it brings tears to my eyes each time because I wish Kichara Forest Retreat would become like a Shambhala, where we come from KL and we come through Bentong, and then the road's a little messy, and we enter through the gates. It's just pristine and beautiful here. And what we do here is we practice. We're kind to each other. We're giving. We practice Dharma. We improve our minds. We let go of our baggage. We let go of our garbage. And we just develop compassion. That's what I like KFR to be. And also, I hope some of us can take rebirth in Shambhala. And it's incredible because in the Dorje Shugden Sadhanas, in the beginning, not sadhana, it's the Shugden Puja text, in the beginning, one of the places you invite him from is Shambhala. So he resides there. So that's a synopsis of the Shambhala movie. And the Shambhala movie, Lost Horizon, written by James Hilton, is based on the actual Shambhala texts that are from the Tibetan Lamas of the Himalayan region, or the Himalayan Lamas of the Himalayan region, of which one of the lineage holders is His Holiness the Great Line of Panchen Lamas. And so I like that movie because it's related to the text. I like the movie because of the ideal. The romantic part and the Western embellishment, it's interesting, but I guess they had to sell it to the Western audience with some Western ideas, which is beautiful too. And so we have found the text, The Path to Shambhala, Shambhala Lamik, written by the Panchen Lama. And you know what? It was translated into German. So it's the Panchen Lama giving you instructions and directions and meditations how to get to Shambhala. So this text is in German. And Valentina worked very hard for the last 3-4 months finding her own sponsorship. And she had a PhD holder, a renowned PhD holder in German, translated into English. So she's had the whole text. How many pages?
120.
So she's had 128 pages in German translated into English. It's never been in English before. So this text, based on how to get to Shambhala, how to do the practice to get to Shambhala, right, was in Tibetan. It was translated into German by a scholar. Now it's translated into English by an Indonesian scholar. And it's been checked and rechecked by other scholars. And the English is very, very, very good. So I'm going to present this text by His Holiness Panchen Lama on Shambhala in English. And then we're going to have a blog on it, and it's going to support Shambhala. It's going to give a background on Shambhala and the kings and Panchen Lama, all that stuff. So that blog post is coming out. We've been working on this blog. They have been working on this blog post for about 6 months now. So it's going to be explosive. It's going to be wonderful. The most beautiful part about this is that it's going to have the text by Panchen Lama in English for the first time ever. So Valentina arranged all of that. Valentina Suhendra. So I'm excited to have that text for everybody, because anybody who's serious in practicing the Shambhala teachings, they need this text by Panchen Lama. The second thing is I'm going to include the movie Lost Horizon in this blog post because, well, it's something related with Western embellishments. So it's going to be a very exciting blog post, and I'm recording this to explain the synopsis of the movie and what's Shambhala and how it's all related. Okay? Any questions? Good. Let's do this.